10 years ago, almost 2017, I actually became an enrolled agent, and I made it a mission that my only thing I want to do in taxes is help people with tax problems. And that's what we do. I own a company called Tax Debt Consultants that was co-founded by me and my wife, and we help people with tax problems.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow Podcast. I'm Gary Wolfen, your host, and I'm glad to have you back listening to the show or watching if that's the case, because you can watch it as well. We've got a great guest today. Carlos Samaniego is on. He's deals with taxes. I'm not going to go too much in the introduction here. I'm going to let him do that. But he also has experience, like a lot of you listeners do, in real estate. I mean, an agent, lender, and he's worked with investors before. So he is the perfect podcast guest for this podcast. So please make sure you're listening, paying attention, taking notes. Unless you're driving, don't worry. We'll put it in the show notes too, so you can get it when you get home later. But in any case, without further ado, Carlos, thank you for joining us, man. I've been looking forward to this, and it's one of my favorite subjects because so many people are afraid of this stuff, but it's actually not anything to really be afraid of as long as you do the right thing and just be calm, work with the right person like you, for example. So first off, welcome aboard. Thank you for doing this,
Thank you, Gary. I'm truly excited to be here talking about this unique aspect of taxes, which is primarily dealing with the IRS and dealing with challenges with the IRS. And that's kind of my specialty. So yeah, I'm actually looking forward to it. We were talking about earlier, I work with a lot of real estate people, real estate investors, and the IRS is, it's one of the biggest fears in the world, other than public speaking and dying. I would imagine IRS is having to deal with the IRS is one of those major fears, and that's what I specialize in. And I'm looking forward to sharing my story in regards to how I got started doing that.
Awesome. Well, actually, if you wouldn't mind, I mean, I'm always curious how you got into this. So if you would you mind share that part? Like, what was the sort of the nexus that brought you into this part of the business, if you don't mind sharing,
Absolutely, Gary. Actually, this goes all the way back into my 20s, my early 20s. Considering I'm 55 now, so it's 30 plus years ago. I actually got started after a short stint in the military. Ended up becoming an EMT paramedic, guy that drives that ambulance, right? And a pivotal moment in my life happened at that young age, is where I was working a whole bunch of overtime, and I remember the older guy, and I think the older guy might have been 21, right? The older guy said, "Hey, stop working so much. Stop working so much," because at the time I was just trying to make some extra money, right, during the holidays.
Right.
And he said, "Stop working so much. Just claim 10 exemptions on your paycheck, and you'll get a bigger paycheck. They won't withhold the taxes, basically." So, and common thing a lot of people do, and I did that. So ended up doing that. Tax time came around quite a few months later, and I remember self-preparing my own returns, and then realized it was a big tax bill because they weren't holding any taxes, and I was working all that overtime. So because I didn't have the money, I just didn't file my return, Gary. And the thing that happened after that was I wasn't smart enough or I was dumb enough not to change it. So I literally went an entire year without them withholding taxes. Same thing happened the following year. Big tax bill, couldn't afford to pay it. I didn't file it. Well, Gary, that went on for 8 years. 8 years of me not filing taxes. And and it was interesting. And this is like back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. The IRS really didn't reach out to me. And a lot of people always say, well, I haven't heard nothing. And the IRS at that time really didn't hear out from me. But it wasn't until the state of California actually reached out to me, found me, sent me a letter, and just basically said, "Hey, you haven't filed your taxes. Where are they?" And that was the domino effect that created a tax nightmare for me. California basically reached out to me. I ended up having to deal with them in a short-term method, for that time frame. I dealt with the state because the IRS still hadn't caught on. But a lot of people don't realize the state will normally talk to the IRS. Quite a few years later, the IRS reaches out to me, same thing. "Where's your 8 years of tax returns?" And by this time, I'm in my mid-30s. And you can see how long that time frame it takes them. And I had realized what the heck was going on here. And at that time, I had already left the paramedic industry. And that's when I actually got involved in becoming a lender for Chase Manhattan Mortgage and eventually becoming a
Okay.
real estate agent as well. This is like in the 2005, right before the big breakup in 2008, right? So that's what I was doing, making decent money at that time, and still the IRS wasn't really, they had reached out to me. I had touched base with them, but there was a key moment that happened at that time, Gary, that's important. I ended up meeting a girl that I eventually fell in love with, got engaged to, and got married to, and never told her my tax problem, which is a scumbag
Oh,
move for anybody. And
yeah.
there's good news there. She's actually, I'm married to her. She's sitting right behind me here. But Liz at the time, after I had did that, I had realized I needed to figure this out and finally solve my tax problems. So I had reached out to an enrolled agent. There's only 3 people in the country that are allowed to help you with tax problems: tax attorneys,
Mhm.
CPAs, and an enrolled agent. And this guy was an
Okay.
enrolled agent. And he told me, I went to him and I told him that story I just told you. And he said the key thing: you're not a bad person, but you did make a dumb choice. But we're going to fix that problem and get you right with the IRS. And then when I had that conversation, I went to my wife and sat down with her and told her how bad I've been. But I came to her with a solution. Luckily for me, she didn't divorce me right after that moment. And then um, my problems started getting
Yeah.
fixed. And I always remember that man, Ernie, who helped me, told me one thing. He said, if you ever decide to make a career change in your life, I think you'd be really good at this type of work. And 10 years ago, almost in 2017, I actually became an enrolled agent, and I made it a mission that my only thing I want to do in taxes is help people with tax problems. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
I own a company called Tax Debt Consultants that was co-founded by me and my wife, and we help people with tax problems. Here I am.
Nice. That's a amazing story. It's very compelling too. And what's
Right.
interesting is I know in the past, and I've done I don't know how many hundreds of podcasts now. When you have a authentic, genuine life story like that, um, you've got now you got everybody's attention. Everybody listens to this podcast. I guarantee they're glued. They've told everybody, "Hey, be quiet," they're taking notes. Um, so let's go ahead and move forward here. I mean I know people personally that have done some of the same things. Um, One guy I know did the tax exemption thing. He or
Yeah.
withholdings. He took the maximum withholdings from exemption. A single guy, wasn't even married, no kids,
Yeah.
and let that run for a while. And what's the problem is once you start it, it's easy to let it keep going because nobody seems like they're paying attention, and then it's like a habit kind of thing. And another
Yeah.
person I know had gone 7 years without filing, and you know, so I'm sure there's plenty of people listening that either have been in these, walked this path or know people who have. So if you could, let's talk about like what it is you actually do. So
Yeah.
how do people, find you? How do you find them? Like, what's the point of
Right.
engagement if somebody needs help working with the
Yeah.
IRS? Is usually, yeah.
You know what's interesting, Gary, is that I say I'm in a very unique position in my industry. I'm not your regular tax guy. We were talking about, you've had a lot of tax guests on your show, right? Talking about probably tax
Mhm.
planning, tax deductions, how to best invest your money from a tax point of view. My practice specifically, I deal with tax problems. So I tell people, usually when you're coming to me, the problem already exists or has been existing for a while. Either you have unfiled tax returns, you owe a large past due tax balance, or maybe you're even under an audit. Those are the 3 things that I kind of deal with. And the number one, I tell people, I have one of the best partners in the world from a marketing point of view. It's the IRS. The IRS literally sends all my marketing, right? They send all these letters to people that haven't paid their taxes or have unfiled tax returns. But what's unique and it's
Mhm.
important for your audience to know, Gary, is a lot of people that have these problems think the IRS forgot about them. And here's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
If you have a large tax balance due or haven't filed your tax returns, for the last 4 years, the IRS has not attempted to collect from anybody. And it was part of the whole
Yeah.
COVID, because of COVID, the government basically said, hey, if we're dealing with the pandemic here, we are not going to go after people financially for their taxes because we should give them some breathing room. So they basically stopped all their automated collection letters. Most of the IRS agents went back home. They were working from home. There wasn't much action happening. So a lot of people initially, when they come to me, they're like, I think they forgot about me because I haven't received anything. Well, that's the reason they forgot about you. They didn't forget. They just put everything on hold. But everything changed in January. In January of this year, the government basically told IRS, go ahead and restart the collection notices. Start sending those notices. So if you're listening to this and you have a client that's that all of a sudden starts getting these letters, this is the reason they're getting the letters. It's just the government has just turned it back on. And Gary, August 15th was a big date in the IRS's books because on August 15th, they finally started sending what's called a final notice before levy. It's called the letter 11. The letter 11, I tell people, is the one letter you cannot ignore. And a lot of people sometimes won't even open their notices, right? But that's a letter you can't ignore because that is a hard and fast date. You got 30 days to figure something out to deal with your tax issue. And how do people find me? Usually the way people find me is they actually go online and start searching who can help me with my problem. Because H&R Block is really not going to, they're trying to do this type of work, but they don't even have the experience to do this work. So you need to find somebody that's either an enrolled agent, a tax attorney, or a CPA that specializes in this type of work because it really is a different type of work dealing with the IRS on a daily basis and how they're going to try to collect money from you and at least preventing that. So I hope that kind of explained it.
Did you know that you can participate in class every Monday? We call it Monday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern, with me and dozens of other investor agents from around the country, in fact, the world. Every Monday, totally free. No selling, no recruiting, just straight up education on anything and everything in real estate. And we have a lot of good guests coming on once or twice a month, bringing in expertise on subjects like how to buy a house with crypto. Okay. How about them apples? What about AI? How's AI affecting our business? How about the metaverse, blockchain processing? We're already using it in title work. So come on to Monday Night Live. Be ready to take notes and ask questions because it's live and engaging, and you get to participate by asking questions and meeting others. So we'll see you there. Go to realestateWithGaryWilson.com. Click on the resource tab, drop down, and you'll see Monday Night Live. And in there, you can see one of the most recent classes. But more importantly, you can register for class as many as you want going up to like the end of the year, I believe. So in any case, do that. We'll see you on Monday Night Live. Look forward to meeting you in person. Take care. So really what happens is people they'll reach out to you because they've received one of these notices and I guess they is everything online now? But I mean, can they come in person? I guess can you serve people from around the country?
I serve people across the world. You'll be shocked how many people reach out to me from Latin America. I'm getting a lot of people from Asia, and it's usually a lot of people that have left either, they're expats or they're just working in different parts of the world. And sometimes a lot of them feel that the IRS doesn't go after them, but they actually find out that they can still find them wherever. So I would say 80% of my clients meet with me either virtually via Zoom. A lot of our businesses are that way now, right? So, and then I have a small percentage that will fly in locally here to Southern California because I actually have an actual practice where you can sit down at my desk and talk to me. There's a lot of people that are trying to do this type of work that just won't do that. Which is kind of scary to me sometimes.
We know it's interesting is people should need to realize the United States taxes worldwide income. It doesn't matter where you're on order. If you're still maintain U.S. citizenship, they're gonna tax you whether you make it in Egypt, South Africa, or the U.S. And by the way, within the states, California, the state, is also practices global taxation. They'll tax you wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you make the money. It doesn't matter. I'm
so happy that you brought that up. I am shocked by the amount of people that don't not only to realize on the worldwide income, because obviously there's some people that move out of the country. I'm shocked a lot of people think that if you just move out of a state, that a state can't come after you.
Yeah.
Which right now, me specific, I'm in California, and we got a lot of Californians leaving, going to Florida, Texas, going to
Yeah.
try to non-income tax states, and they're shocked to find out that California found them. And I said California, and it's any state pretty much that has a taxing agency. New York, Connecticut, California, Illinois, these are some of the more aggressive ones that no matter where you go, they're going to find you and they're going to collect on their money. And another thing that's really important, like in California, and me and Gary were talking about this earlier, was if you owe past due taxes or have unfiled tax returns, they have the right to cancel any type of occupational license, driver's license. So your ability to basically earn an income can be taken away from you because you owe them taxes. So that's really important to deal with. In fact, Gary, when people come to me with their IRS problems, it's funny listening to them because they'll tell me, what's going on, and then I'll say, okay, that's great. What state do you live in? And they're like, well, I don't have a state problem. I go, well, you don't believe you have a state problem, but I'm going to double check that to make sure you don't have a state problem, because the state will typically be 100 times faster coming after their money because they want to get their money before the IRS gets their money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that, I mean, when it comes to this whole subject, people really don't have the education, don't have the information. They're not, it's one areas of life, and particularly business, where I see people lacking the most information. And I don't know all the details. I just happen to know a lot because I've traveled. I've taught people in from all 50 states and multiple countries too. So I had to
Right.
learn all this stuff, and interviewing people on podcasts. I learn. It's just an amazing thing that I'm doing. But uh, I've seen that happen before, where one person, I can't remember the states. I think it was Louisiana, and whatever they did in Louisiana happened in Louisiana, and then they're in Florida. The next thing you know, their Florida license is revoked. And they're like, "What the heck happened?" This is all here.
Right.
I don't know all the details, but it's I'm gathering whatever they did in Louisiana. Louisiana must have a reciprocal agreement with Florida where they could remove the person's Florida license or revoke it until they make good on the Louisiana whatever they did, the debt or
And,
something,
that, and
right?
that's
So I'm guessing,
absolutely, that's exactly what they're doing. It's a reciprocal agreement,
yeah,
because people will try to move out of. I hear, Gary. It's funny. I hear it all the time. Well, I'm done with California. I'm not going to pay them. I'm moving to Florida. It's not going away,
yeah,
right?
right. Well, not only that, and I don't know if this is true or not. I know I want to get back to the main subject, but
Yeah.
somebody just told me that California now, um, they have an exit tax where if you leave the state of California, it's not, I swear he said they can tax you for up to 20 years, even if you move and set up domicile in Florida. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm like, wow,
They're
that's
trying.
aggressive.
Yeah, they
Mm,
are trying to approve that through legislation, and I think it's primarily
mm,
going after a lot of kind of the extremely wealthy individuals that are doing that. I have
yeah,
not heard that it's actually passed, but there are talks of trying to pass that type of legislation. Um,
wow.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that is a big one. What California is doing is they are
Mm,
doing very intensive audits. They're called residency audits. Because we get a lot of people here in California that, they'll go to like Nevada and try to register their cars, or they'll get a mailbox in Nevada and try to say that all their income goes to Nevada, but they're actually living in California. So a
mm,
residency audit, when that happens, they are looking at everything, where you're going to church, where are your doctors? And the other thing that they actually now doing, they are not only checking social media, what kind of are you making posts, in California, but they're also doing cell phone audits. Where is your cell phone pinging to determine whether you really left California or not?
wow. How about that? Um, so let's go back. So let's say somebody they reach out to you, they call you up, and hey Carlos, I received this notice from the IRS, and I got the 30-day deal. I understand that that's important. So
Right.
they come in to see you. What are the what are the sequence of steps? What's the
Yeah.
process?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
If you can
Perfect,
describe, because
perfect.
people are always curious. Yeah.
That's a great question because the first and hardest part when dealing with the tax problem is just admitting that you got a tax problem. That is really, honestly, that is the hardest part, Gary. Just saying, okay, I
Mhm.
haven't filed my returns in years, or I got this large balance, I need to do something. So I tell people when they pick up the phone and call me to set up, and I do free consults to just listen to what their problem is or what they actually believe their problem is. And I
Mhm.
tell people I can solve all tax problems in three basic steps. And I talk about this, and it's in my book. We'll talk about it at the end, which I'm going to give away to your
Okay.
audience here. Is the three basic steps
Okay.
is step one is investigate or discover. Here's what I mean by that is that when if I decide to take you on as a client and I believe I can help you, is that I'm going to immediately file a power of attorney with the IRS so we can get them off your back so you never have to talk to them. That's important. I don't want you saying
Okay.
something that you shouldn't be saying. Once I
Mhm.
do that, I actually can get access to all the IRS's internal records on everything that's happened with the client. So, because a lot of times the client will say, well, Carlos, I think the last time I filed was 2017. I think my balance is this. A lot of times they really don't know. A lot of people just ignore their notices, right? So, when I
Yeah.
file the power of attorney, I'm going to find out everything. When's the last time you filed a tax return? How old is your tax debt? When does your tax debt expire? Do you qualify for penalty abatements? What letters have you received? Have you gotten that letter 11? And we have a 30-day time frame to stop the IRS. I'm going to find out all that information because just like a doctor, and I use this all the time being a former, EMT medic, you don't go to a doctor and say, I got a headache. And he doesn't say, well, come into the office for brain surgery next week, right? Here's what they actually say. Well, if you got an extreme headache, why don't you come in for some blood labs and x-rays? Let us see let's investigate what's going on so we can determine how to best treat you. So I'm doing the same thing. With that power of attorney, I'm basically getting the blood labs and x-rays of your tax world. So we can figure out what's going on so we can actually have a strategy on how to deal with the problem that you're dealing with. So once I know what that strategy is, once I know what the problem is, and I can come up with a basic strategy by looking at the problem, the next step is part two, is compliance. What is compliance? In the IRS and even in the state world, all it basically means that you filed all the tax returns that you're legally required to file. So step two, the compliance is filing tax returns. And here's what's interesting, Gary. You mentioned earlier that you had somebody that you know hadn't filed their tax returns in 7 years. Well, what's great is the government, the IRS at least, they only want the last 6 years to be compliant. I've actually had clients come in here that haven't filed in 19 years, and they were so stressed out, like, how am I going to put all this together, these 19 years? And I said, here's the good news. The government doesn't want 19 years. If we can just do the last 6 years, they will consider you fully compliant. And the reason that is so important is because the government won't work with you in regards to your problem until you're compliant. They basically are saying to themselves, we're not going to deal with your past problems if we don't know what the current problem is. And the only way to know what the current problem is you got to file your tax returns. So
Right.
that's step two, is just filing the tax returns. So we're going to, get those tax returns filed in our offices, do those files for them, the back filings for them. So now,
Right.
once we're done with step two, a quick question is people will always ask, well, what if I can't find my documents for the last 6 years to do those returns? Well, when we do the power of attorney, the government will give us all your W-2s, your 1099s, all your investment statement, that we get all that information from them. So we can actually prepare those returns. The final
Okay.
step, Gary, is now that we know what the problem is, what the total problem is, now we just got to figure out how are we going to solve this. Is the balance small enough where you can afford an installment agreement?
Mhm.
Maybe the balance is so big that you have no ability to pay. There's an option called a currently not collectible, where the IRS will stop all collections as long as we can show that you don't have the ability to pay them. Or is it an offer in compromise? That's kind of what you hear, Gary, on the radio all the time, where, settle for pennies on the dollar. Yes, the government does do that. They're very strict standards in regards to that. They're not giving it away like candy, but Gary, I've had clients $300,000 tax balances that have been sellable for less than $4,000. I had another client just
Wow.
recently, $150,000 balance sell less than $1,000. Again, strict qualifications. And here's the good news, Gary, and for all you listeners listening to this, we can typically tell you in a 10-minute conversation if you have a possibility of qualifying for something like that. Please beware. And the IRS is even warning people right now. There's a lot of these offer and compromise mills that are kind of telling everybody, oh, everybody qualifies for this program. They're taking a huge money from them. They file the paperwork full well knowing they never qualified in the first place. And all they do is they get a cancellation from the IRS of a fraudulent offer and compromise or just a turn down because they never qualified in the first place. And now they lost out on thousands of dollars that went to these fraudulent companies.
Yeah.
Those are the three
Wow.
steps. Any tax problem, I don't care if it's a $10,000 tax problem or a $10 million tax problem, we can solve it in those three steps. Pretty basic.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the step number one is probably the most important, which is you're getting the power of attorney, and not separating the consumer from the IRS, but kind of technically communication wise,
Yes.
you're relieving them of the necessity to do that because likely they don't have the knowledge you have and are likely to make mistakes. So
And that's a real, what you just said there is so important, Gary, is that a lot of people, and I tell people all of this, anybody says, well, I can handle this myself. Yes, there's a bunch of, if you're selling your house, you can sell it by yourself, but there can be a lot of mistakes, right? Heck, even doing my own oil change, I've made mistakes, right? But when you're dealing with the IRS, yes, you can call the IRS and try to deal with it yourself. But the problem is, are you going to say the wrong thing, which is going to cause even more problems? And remember, the government's number one job is to collect money from you. So typically, they will go right into the conversation of, here's one of their first conversations. Where do you bank at? They want to know immediately. Where do you work at? Why do they want to know that? They want bank levies and wage garnishments, so they come after you. Yes, they could get the information, but they want to get it from you directly. So that power of attorney prevents that. I don't want them talking to them.
yeah, yeah. Now sometimes kind of like a little side conversation where you hear people saying they're just going to move to a country that I forget what the law is, but the country doesn't have extradition laws for the U.S. And I can't remember
Dubai
the
is
name of
one
it.
of them, I believe. I actually had a taxpayer's spouse had told me that their spouse moved to Dubai to get away from the IRS. Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, that's a major life decision. I mean, what if you have kids and family and stuff? I mean, good Lord. But is
Exactly.
it really true? I mean, it seems to me like if you slip up once, let's say you decide to take a vacation in Germany and you're in Dubai and you go to Germany and maybe the IRS is watching your credit cards or something. I don't know if they're able to do this stuff, but they find
They
you
are.
there. Will Germany extradite you to the US and then you got to face the piper? That's what I'm saying. That seems to me like it doesn't pay to try to run somewhere in the
It
world.
does.
The world is finite. It's a round ball. You can run out of space eventually. So,
And the financial system is
um,
the same way, right? Everybody's reporting everything. So it's almost impossible. They're going to find you in regards to your financial transactions as well. And talking about traveling, Gary,
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of people don't realize that the government will, it's called certify your passport, which basically once you reach a $63,000 balance, it is you cannot get a passport or even renew a passport once that balance reaches that level. And there's ways of actually
wow.
reversing that. But the IRS has restarted that certification process. So if you got a balance anywhere near that balance level, either higher or soon to get there, expect the letter from the IRS on your passport to be, in essence, canceled.
Yeah, man. Well, I tell you what, I really feel for people that are going through something like this. I know I told you and I've spoken before, and I was audited, but it wasn't a negative thing. It was just what happened is I filed consistently every single year. I was current, I mean, everything's, pure as the driven snow. But what happened one year, I sold the property, and it was a 90 unit apartment complex. We closed on December 15th of that year.
Mhm.
So I didn't pay into anything. I didn't make quarterly installments to cover that because I didn't know when we were going to close. Sometimes those big deals take years, you know.
Right,
So in any
right,
case, I filed, of course, for that year, and then I think it was I forget. It was within a year. It didn't take that long. I got the notice I was being audited. But the thing is, I called my tax accountant right away, and he said, "Just relax. Most people get audited when you make big transactions or all of a sudden you make a lot of money that you weren't making before, or you make a lot less money. Something big has changed in your return." He said, "That's all it is. They're just looking for information." He said, "I'm going to start it off. I'll help, get the information, provide it." But he said, "Just so you know, I'm not legally representing you." He wasn't my power of attorney. He said,
right.
"I'm just going to guide you through the process." And I listened to everything he told me. It took a whole
Mhm.
year, but at the end of the year, the agent had come to my office several times. He wanted things. I said, "Well, if you could just come by, we can make copies for you right there on the office machine." I always gave them whatever they asked for. I never complained. I was polite,
Right.
and also never gave them anything they didn't ask for. It was something the tax accountant told me. But is
Exactly.
there any wisdom in that you can share with people? In other words, I mean, I was prepared, of course. It was just an anomaly that I had this big giant, you know, flux of income out of the blue come in like that. But the point is, I never got nervous. At the end of the day, I realized, you know what? They're just regular people like you and I. They're just looking for information for the most part. Is that generally true? They're just looking for clarity, I guess, in a lot of audits. I don't know if that's, you know,
That's and 100%. That's all they're trying to do. The IRS is not trying to, as many people will think, the IRS is just trying to get all the money from you. The IRS specifically says they just want to get the money that's due to them based on the tax return that you filed.
yeah,
And if they believe that the tax return might have some discrepancies, and that's how you end up with you'll end up with an audit, and they're just double checking
yeah,
that the numbers that you came up with. Remember, when the vast majority of people, when they file their tax returns, you're inputting that number. They're taking your word for that. Those are the actual numbers, right? And
right.
every so often, it's a small percentage of them have to be audited. One, because they want to make sure that people are being honest, and then maybe kind of like in your situation, you had a large discrepancy from year to year, and they're saying,
Mhm.
"Well, okay, what happened here? Did he make a mistake, or is this a legitimate, whether it's a deduction or income, whatever it might be?" Um, but you did something that was really smart. You kept accurate records, and I think for a lot of the self-employed people, real estate agents, insurance agents, one of the things that I see, it's a common thing, is just that their records aren't the best in the world. Um, I always tell people when I see my real estate agents that I deal with is, hey, first and foremost, do you have a separate bank account for your business? Don't
Yeah,
commingle your personal stuff with your business account. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, just go get a separate checking account, and all your commissions should go in there. All your expenses for your business should come out of there, and then when the money that's left over, you can transfer that over to your personal to pay your bills and do. That is a smart way, because it's an audit question. Do you keep your personal and financial accounts separate? And they want to see that. They want to see that separateness there, because one, if you're in business, you should be treating it like a business, not commingling your funds and items like that.
right.
That's really smart. Another thing for a lot of real estate agents, it's the number one audited thing that they actually have on their return is miles. Most agents drive a lot of miles. They're showing houses, listing houses, they're going back and forth, and they have terrible records, and you're supposed to keep records. There's a great app called mileiq.com. Mileiq.com. It's a great
Okay.
app, goes on your phone. It automatically tracks all your miles automatically. You don't even have to do anything. And then, once a month you can get on there and just, hey, that was a personal drive, that was a business drive. You swipe it left and right. And then there's AI detection in there that remembers, oh, every time he went to the office, that's a business expense. You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
And that's a fail-safe proof way for you to make sure when you're audited on those miles, which is typically your biggest deduction, that you pass that with flying colors. And the last thing I encourage people for, especially us commission people, real estate agents, a lot of insurance agents, when you get that commission check, make sure that you're paying a portion of that money to the IRS, estimated
Yeah.
taxes. You know, a lot of times, Gary, you probably hear this, pay your quarterly estimated. I tell my real estate agents, don't pay a quarterly estimated. Every time you get a commission check, just cut a check to the IRS right there. You don't have to think about it. It's done. Because there's a lot of agents and self-employed people getting themselves in trouble because we all did it. I remember being a real estate agent, right? You get that big commission check, even before you get it, that money's spent, right? You got to buy some stuff, you got to go on vacation, and the IRS is the last thing on your mind. So here's what we all think: hey, my next check's gonna go to the IRS, but we know that doesn't happen. So it's just best to do it a little bit with every check.
Yeah, you got it. Well, listen, we've covered a lot here, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and experience and examples and really your time. But how can people get a hold of you? I mean, I understand you've got the book. So if you have the book with you, you can. Oh, there it is. Okay.
It's called How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse. It's the first book I ever did. It sells on Amazon, I think $15-20. But if you go to taxdebtbook.com, pick up a free PDF version of this. Send it to anybody that that might have some tax problems and challenges. I share my story in there that I mentioned earlier, and the top those 3 steps I talked about are all written in that book. So that's the best way. It's just to at least get something in your hands to read. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to my company website, taxdebtconsultant.com. Taxdebtconsultant.com. You can read all about me and what we do, and see. I've been all over the news, so you can kind of just learn more about me there.
Excellent. Okay, so taxdebtbook.com and taxdebtconsultant.com. So everybody, that you want to write down. I mean, if you're driving, don't try to do that now, of course.
No.
Yeah. But Carlos, I just want to thank you again, and I want to thank you, the listener, or if you're watching this, please leave a review. This is another one of those podcasts. Man, you can't get this stuff on any radio station or most other podcasts. This is good stuff. So we love your reviews. It's what makes the podcast world go around. And in the meantime, if you could do that, we'd appreciate it. And we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. And again, back in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and God bless you and your loved ones.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.